that Walt Disney didn't believe in sequels? I know that might seem a little surprising given the current output by the Walt Disney Company today. Right now, it can feel like Disney is producing an endless number of sequels, spin-offs, and remakes, but this isn't the kind of creative output that Walt Disney ever desired to produce. The truth is that Walt actually had a lot of negative sentiments about the concept of sequels. I actually discovered this philosophy while reading the official Walt Disney quotebook, which I've linked for you down below if you'd like to check it out yourself. You see, Walt Disney stated, "I've never believed in doing sequels. I didn't want to waste the time I have doing a sequel. I'd rather be using that time doing something new and different. It goes back to when they wanted me to do more pigs." Today, I want to tell you the story of these three little pigs and how they turned Walt Disney against sequels. And I want to do this not only so we can get a better understanding of animation history, but so that we can begin to discuss Walt's own creative philosophy. Now, of course, Walt was okay with continuing to tell new stories with beloved characters like Mickey Mouse. He was willing to produce spiritual successors to previous projects, like Cinderella was a return to the heroine-led musical fairy tale reminiscent of Snow White. And of course, Walt was fine with continuing series. The Silly Symphonies, his anthology television shows, and his wildlife documentaries were all produced for over a decade. But when it came to his animated feature films, he refused to create any sequels. And that thought process was established during his early days at the studio creating shorts. You see, after the success of Mickey Mouse, Walt began the series called The Silly Symphonies as a way to experiment and push the medium of animation forward. The symphonies were the breeding ground for Technicolor and animation. They provided the introduction of the multiplane camera, and they gave Walt's team the resources to continuously refine their artistry and storytelling. And one of their biggest successes was the 1933 Silly Symphony titled The Three Little Pigs. You see, The Three Little Pigs became a hit on every level. Audiences adored the pigs' battle against the Big Bad Wolf and seemed to universally embrace the song "Who's Afraid of the Big Bad Wolf" as the anthem to fight against the trials of the Great Depression. With the popularity of Pfeiffer Pig, Fiddler Pig, and Practical Pig being so high, the short remained in theaters sometimes for weeks, even being listed at times as the headlining production, which of course meant that financially, The Three Little Pigs was also a triumph. And to cap it all off, The Three Little Pigs was embraced by Hollywood too. In 1934, Walt Disney and The Three Little Pigs won an Academy Award for Best Animated Short. Overall, The Three Little Pigs provided a significant step forward in legitimizing animation as an art form. This short further established Disney's unique style of animation, and once again, this film showcased Walt Disney's mastery of storytelling and his ability to connect with an audience. But there was a downside to all of this success. People wanted more. Specifically, there was growing pressure from Disney's distributor at the time, United Artists, to produce more shorts featuring the three pigs. I inevitably found out in the novel Disney's Art of Animation that while Walt despised repeating himself and attempted to refuse the demands to send more pigs, eventually his brother Roy, who served as his financial protector, convinced him to try to make three more. The Silly Symphonies titled The Big Bad Wolf in 1934, Three Little Wolves in 1936, and The Practical Pig in 1939 all utilized the three pigs and the Big Bad Wolf as main characters in these shorts, while also reusing the famous song Who's Afraid of the Big Bad Wolf. Now, technically, after the Silly Symphonies concluded, the pigs did come back one more time, but it was under a different context. In 1941, as World War II escalated, these characters would be placed in their last short titled The Thrifty Pig. But this film was commissioned to serve as a propaganda piece with the primary goal of selling war bonds. Now, while none of the shorts were ever failures, they were unable to approach the success of the first picture, and Walt never forgot that. You see, prior to his death in 1966, Walt Disney reinforced his long-standing perspective of sequels in his final letter to his shareholders. He declared, "We have bowed only on one occasion to the cry to repeat ourselves. Back in the 30s, The Three Little Pigs was an enormous hit, and the cry went up, 'Give us more pigs.' I could not see how we could possibly top pigs with pigs, but we tried." Now, technically, The Three Little Pigs weren't the only Silly Symphony to receive sequels. 1935's The Tortoise and the Hare was followed up with 1936's Toby Tortoise Returns, and 1935's Three Orphan Kittens was followed up by 1936's More Kittens. But The Three Pigs clearly stood out in Walt's memory and influenced his views on sequels the most as he transitioned into producing feature animated films. You see, in that same shareholder letter, Walt explained, "We didn't make the same mistake with Snow White. When it was a huge hit, the shout went up for more dwarves. Top dwarves with dwarves? Why try? I'm a born experimenter. To this day, I don't believe in sequels. I can't follow popular cycles. I have to move on to new things. There are many new worlds to conquer." Now, fundamentally, I do appreciate this idea of continuing to forge ahead to work on new kinds of projects. The concept that we should never remain complacent in our creative pursuits is inspiring, especially in a world that often says, find something that works and then continue to repeat it until it doesn't anymore. I've often put that kind of pressure on myself to make the same kind of YouTube videos over and over again without allowing myself the freedom to explore and try new things that I'm interested in. You know, Walt got to be creative only because Roy was willing to handle the business. But as someone who's doing everything myself here on YouTube, the creative and business side of me can often clash. But luckily, Walt was able to focus on being the creative leader he was always meant to be. You see, prior to his passing, there were demands once again to follow up his most recent success, Mary Poppins. But once again, he refused to go down that road, stating, "Right now, we're not thinking about another Mary Poppins. We never will." Of course, while Walt Disney never desired to create a follow-up to Mary Poppins, over 50 years later, Mary Poppins did return to the silver screen. But this was not the only film by Walt Disney that would receive a follow-up decades after his passing. After the Walt Disney Company's first feature-length animated sequel in 1990 with The Rescuers Down Under, over the years, there have been a variety of theatrical and direct-to-video sequels that have served as a continuation of Walt's stories, such as Fantasia 2000, Return to Neverland, and Bambi 2. Now, whether or not you believe any of these films should exist, I have to say that generally, I don't think that all sequels are inherently inferior to the original work. They're not all superfluous or repetitive or uninspired. Like, Walt Disney never got to see the work of George Lucas as he established an entire living universe through each film in the original Star Wars trilogy. Walt never saw how Peter Jackson was able to adapt the Lord of the Rings trilogy into a massive yet intimate epic. When sequels are done right, like in the case of Toy Story's trilogy and the How to Train Your Dragon trilogy, we as an audience are given the opportunity to continue to see how characters and worlds evolve over time in meaningful and satisfying ways. But in the case of The Three Little Pigs, Snow White, and Mary Poppins, if Walt was satisfied with the story he had told and had no interest in expanding the characters further, then of course he shouldn't have felt compelled to produce a sequel. While I do think that there is value in a creator dedicating time to developing a world and exploring the characters who inhabit it, like James Cameron is doing with Avatar, I am personally glad that Walt Disney felt empowered to experiment as much as he did, because that provided such a range of classic stories for us to enjoy today. Of course, he always hoped that audiences would resonate with what he made, but there was never any way of knowing which productions would be considered classics. As he explained in his shareholder letter, we know we cannot hit a home run with the bases loaded every time we go to the plate. We also know the only way we can even get to the first base is by constantly going to bat and continuing to swing. And so we're always looking for new ideas and new stories, hoping that somehow we'll come up with a different kind of Mary Poppins, or even a different kind of Disneyland. Now, personally, I think Walt Disney's creative philosophy to continuously pursue new kinds of projects seems like a more realistic way for many of us to find success, because through each project's success or failure, we're able to learn, evolve, and improve. Of course, there's a part of me that would love to spend a few years writing a massive Disney history book explaining the behind the scenes of all the weird and experimental animated films Disney created in the early 2000s. But that puts a lot of pressure on that one project to succeed. Whereas if I continue to make experimental Disney history videos like this one, intermixed with more traditional videos about the characters and the worlds within Disney's movies, I'm able to learn about Disney history and discover if people enjoy topics like this while I continue to grow this channel. Of course, it's scary to turn away from what's worked in the past and to try new things. putting everything on the line for our dreams without any assurance of whether that path will work is frightening. It's uncomfortable to pursue a new adventure. But the only way any of us can grow beyond who we are today and create something meaningful and original by taking a leap of faith and trying something new. To quote Walt one more time, you can't top pigs with pigs. Now, if you like to be updated on all of the weird and experimental things that I'm doing and learning about, I started a newsletter that I'm introducing today called The Imaginative Press. You see, a few times each month, I'll send an email directly to you about what I'm learning about Disney's past, present, and future, along with my takes on all of it and all of the things that I'm working on. If that sounds interesting to you, you can find the link to The Imaginative Press down below. And finally, I'm Isaac Carlson. Thanks for watching and have a magical day.